Let's dive into that a little bit more. What are your recommendations for protecting homes and communities? What mitigation efforts can people reasonably take on?
Yeah, so it's four things, and they're fairly simple and straightforward, and they're highly effective. Number one, home hardening, and basically what that means is making the home itself more fireproof, more fire resistant. Sometimes it's simple things like sweeping the dry leaves off the roof, putting on a rain gutter guard so that dry leaves and twigs don't accumulate in the rain gutters. And what happens is the embers are blown by the winds far in advance of the flames, sometimes a mile or two. They'll land on the roof, they'll roll down into the rain gutter, ignite the dry leaves and pine needles and twigs, whatever, and cause the roof to catch on fire. The other big one is exterior vents, especially attic vents. A lot of the older houses have a coarse wire mesh vent. It's like a 1/4 inch mesh. The embers blow right through that. And in many cases, the majority of homes that burn in fires burn from that single cause. A couple $100 at any hardware store, buy a modern ember-proof vent with a fine wire mesh, 1/8 inch, 1/16 inch. It'll prevent that from happening. So that's the first one, home hardening. The second one is what we call defensible space pruning. And it's basically pruning vegetation within 100 feet of the home at most. The first 30 feet is the most important. Dry grasses, lower limbs, things like that. The most combustible material, getting that away from the house. And then the third one is evacuation planning and evacuation assistance. A lot of communities don't have evacuation plans, and so you see, some really, really bad things happen when a fire occurs because there isn't a plan and they haven't, prepared for it. And the last one, of course, is we need to shift our focus and resources away from vegetation management and vegetation removal, removing trees, shrubs, way out in wildlands, trying to, based on the idea that will somehow stop a fire from reaching communities, because it's not working. The fires are weather and wind driven, and they're blowing right through those areas where forests have been thinned or shrubs have been removed, sometimes faster toward the towns. And instead, we shift our resources instead to focus directly on communities to support the home hardening, the defensible space pruning, and the evacuation assistance and planning. If we do that, we will save homes and lives on a tremendous scale.
So I just want to dig into what you just said there. There are de-pruning efforts, logging efforts, etc., that communities will undertake in an effort to prevent wildfires. But your assessment is these efforts are not working.
Well, so if they're done in the community itself, they're extremely effective. Inside the community and immediately adjacent, within 100 feet of homes, that works. But if it's and it's really not logging; it's just pruning vegetation and making the houses more fireproof and doing the evacuation planning, the evacuation assistance. But if what's happening right now is our federal wildfire policy is oriented towards subsidizing to the tune of billions of dollars per year, mostly logging projects out in remote forest lands, mostly on public lands. And the narrative there is that will somehow curb a fire, it'll stop a fire, make it burn slow or stop, and it won't ever burn miles farther and reach a community. Two major problems with that is, number one, most communities that are vulnerable to fires are nowhere near a forest. They're in grasslands or oak woodlands or chaparral, shrub habitat. And so it does them no good. But the second thing is the communities that are in the mountains, in the forests, those fires are being driven by winds even faster through the areas where logging has occurred. Typically because logging changes the microclimate. It reduces the forest canopy cover, it reduces the shade. And so you get hotter, drier, windier conditions. And so, we're focusing on the wrong things, and we could shift our focus directly to protect communities, most of which, are really in kind of lower elevation areas, nowhere near the forested zones.